Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of the Comic Book Network.
That's pretty exciting.
It is indeed. This is a network where you can find comic reviews, comic news, and even unfinished rhymes. That is a gem you can't find anywhere else. That is 100% right there. So to launch right into it, I'd like to talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe Spider-Man movie and what we'd like to see out of it. So there are a lot of hopes and expectations riding on this movie. There are a lot of opportunities as it's launching with it into his career instead of just another rebooted origin story. So what would you like to see? Let's start with the villains.
In the other Spider-Man movies, and a lot of complaints have been it's too much of emotional Spider-Man,
Right.
It's too much Peter Parker being emo and everything. So what I'm thinking is instead of the emotional stuff, if you want the underlying plot, then bring Mysterio as a villain into it, the Quentin Beck version of it, and have him kind of use mind games and trick Spider-Man.
And see how he gets manipulated by that, because he's going to be coming into this thing cocky off of the Civil War.
Yeah.
And he's already an established hero here. He's got his go carefree attitude. And that would really just knock him down a peg to have the psychological aspect of being messed with while having... He's gone most of the time against like brutes and pure force.
It's mostly melee, but to actually bring in him thinking, having to figure stuff out.
Sense of mental challenge.
Now, most of the Spider-Man movies so far have had multiple villains, so if Mysterio isn't it, he could be the underlying instead of the emotional part, and then we could have another stronger villain like Dr. Octopus be the quote main villain,
like the heavy hitter.
Yeah.
And then we got another Thanos with Mysterio just behind the scenes planning all
except Mysterio does stuff.
He does stuff. Well, hey, you can never underestimate the power of putting on an Infinity Gauntlet in the end credits scene.
Yeah, well.
And he did have a whole 2 or 4 lines in Guardians of the Galaxy, so let's never forget that.
Yes.
So I went a completely different way because I want to introduce yet another brute. But I want to do it in a way that doesn't make it a carbon copy of the Spider-Man movies that have come before it. I'm thinking, and just stick with me here, I'm thinking more of a buddy cop type movie. Now we've seen different genres in movies, right? We've got the Guardians of the Galaxy Prison Break and the and kind of space comedy sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then we got Ant-Man and his heist movie, which, don't get me wrong, that was great, but let's keep spicing it up and bring in a sort of buddy cop movie. So here's how we're going to do it. We're going to bring in Carnage. We're going to give a little fight scene to whet their appetites with Spider-Man, who's coming in there swinging. He's cocky. He's spitting jokes, all that sort of thing. But he goes against Venom, ties him up. Opening scene probably in Central Park. That seems to be the main attraction for most Spider-Man villains.
Yeah.
Right? Or Times Square. Times Square is another great one. We gotta get the main focal points, of course. But
easier green screen.
Easier green screen, absolutely. They could put a bunch of GIFs together and get the whole first scene.
Yeah.
That would be great. But I think after we get the little fight out of the way, we cut to Venom in jail already, and we find that a little bit of the symbiote has reproduced, and we've now got Carnage on the loose. And after Venom breaks out in the night or whatever, like a hero, pretty much.
Like a hero.
Like a hero who breaks out of jails.
In the night so no one notices.
Right, like Ant-Man, pretty much.
Yeah.
Except illegally.
Illegally.
Right. They would sort of have sort of an interesting relationship as soon as Venom finds out about Carnage and the creation of Carnage.
What exactly is the creation of Carnage? You haven't explained to us where the Carnage symbiote went.
So we'd have to have a bit of a flashback. We'd have to have maybe some of his personal life. We haven't seen a lot of developed villains, except of course Thanos, as we were talking about earlier. Yeah. Those end credit scenes really do count.
Warming up his seat.
Of course, that's top quality cinema right there. It gets the theater to cheer a little bit. But I think we need to develop him as a relatable character, even though he is, a sociopath or whatever. But you can stick different labels on different people. Doesn't make them, murderers, except in this particular case.
And you're talking about Carnage.
Carnage, absolutely. So we'd have another flashback to his early days as a child. There would probably be some sort of identifying mark so that we can recognize him in the prison later. But he'd have some sort of identifying mark that...
So he's a prisoner?
He's a prisoner in the future, but he would be just a regular old child at an orphanage and, sociopath. So,
just a normal child.
Sociopath. Like you and I.
Right.
So, he would have some little interactions. You'd see him get rejected by the popular girl, get pushed around. It's bad stuff. Almost, we might actually have to rate it R. I mean, at this point, it's pretty graphic.
R for really spooky.
Really spooky indeed. We would see what shapes him into this sort of sociopath, and then we'd cut back to the prison break where Venom's already broken out, and now Cletus Cassidy, who's the kid we see, and who's the kid who has the identifying mark, he gets control of this other symbiote, this Carnage symbiote, and he breaks out. And that leads to a sort of bigger threat than even Spider-Man can handle. And that brings him begging to the feet of Eddie Brock, which we all know is Venom. And that would lead to the little team up. That would lead to some big climax. And that would lead to a successfully developed film. Obviously, we're missing a few key elements like Spider-Man. But aside from that, I think we've got a pretty ace Spider-Man film.
Yeah.
I mean, so... another aspect of the Spider-Man films that needs to be taken into consideration is the love interest. We've seen MJ, we've seen a little bit of Felicia Hardy, we've seen
Gwen Stacy.
Gwen Stacy. So, in my version of the movie, we don't even have love interest. We're going to stick it alone this time. We don't need it.
Well, the way I see it, it's really not Spider-Man without a love interest.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that since it's following Civil War, even though the comic book and the movie might not be similar,
yeah.
I'm thinking maybe we take Mary Jane as the love interest this time, since it is following Civil War, and in the original Civil War, we have Mary Jane.
Right, that would make sense, but also he is married in there, and we're seeing a bit of a younger guy. Hey, if we're gonna have marriage between teenagers, that's awesome, isn't it?
Well,
We fully endorse it. 13-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 11, 9, go ahead. Fully endorsed.
not necessarily married. I'm just thinking.
Just having them as a love interest. Yeah, that would be pretty good. How would you incorporate that in with the Mysterio storyline that you're having here? Any thoughts on how she would be in the plot, be involved?
No.
She could possibly you're a bundle of creativity. She could possibly be one of his torture devices, one of Mysterio's illusions.
A way to get at
him.
Peter Parker.
Yeah, because as we said, we want to avoid the emotional stuff and instead do super emotional stuff.
Right.
Of course.
Brain games.
Emotional games.
Speaking of which, it's on the Discovery Channel, I believe. Brain games.
Yep.
Tuesday nights, 9-10 Central.
And they're paying us 10 cents each time we mention that, so check out Brain Games if you didn't hear it. It's BRAYZLLQ24. That is another 10 cents for me, so that makes about $4 if my math is correct.
Cough, cough, audible.
Yeah. Oh, another subtle little reference there. Thank you.
Subtle, but
brings
in the cash.
It does bring in the cash, of course. We're breaking the bank on this one. Any other must-haves or must-do withouts in the Spider-Man film? Do we need to see a rehash of the origin story?
I do not want to rehash of the origin story.
Would you even accept it in opening credits?
Maybe if they did what they did in the last previous Spider-Man movie with Electro, even though it's not part of MCU, but they kind of show a different spin on his childhood and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And if they did something like that, then, I'd be okay with it, but I don't want another origin, oh, hey, look, here's a spider, ouch, it bit me.
And the 1% of people who don't know Spider-Man's power and responsibility origins are going to be really lost and confused, but it'll be worth it in the long run to have the humor, to have the enjoyability there.
Right.
And speaking of humor, do you think that the confrontation Peter Parker has had with the real world in Civil War will give him any sort of negative attitude come the Spider-Man movie?
I think that it will give him a greater grasp on the world, but I think, depending on which side he joins, he could be very confident in himself,
Uh-huh.
And it gives him real world experience, but the actor is a teenager, and so
right.
I'm assuming Spider-Man will be as well,
yeah.
And he'll still have that teenager carefree,
right, like the I hate you, mom and dad type thing.
Right.
That sort of sentimentality. That would be pretty great, actually.
Yes.
No. Now, would you mind seeing his full-blown humor side? Do you think that's all right in light of having so many other humorous Marvel Cinematic Universe movies? Or do you think they should explore a different side?
I do enjoy Peter Parker, Spider-Man, comedy relief, but depending on what happens in Civil War, he might have to bring it back a notch.
Yeah, and definitely if he's confronting Mysterio, as you would hope, he will be having some sort of
identity crisis or something.
Some sort of bringing down low, so that...
Not sure what's happening.
But we still do want the trademark Spider-Man humor that we all know and somewhat hate, but also really love.
Yes.
So, I think that's about as much as we could exhaust from our current situation in the Spider-Man film.
I believe that covers it, yes.
Let's move on to our second segment, which is our Reads of the Week. This is where we talk about what sort of comics we're reading and why you should buy them. We tell you of the good, the bad, and the squirrel girls of the comic book world. They could be just released, or they could simply be industry standards we're discovering for the first time. So, how about you go ahead with your reads first? What have you been looking at?
So, I'm not an avid comic book reader. I am getting more into it now that we're starting podcasts and stuff. So, what I did in preparation for this episode is I read a lot of Spider-Man, a lot of different types,
A lot of Golden Age stuff.
Golden Age stuff. Spider-Man Anniversary Edition. Not Anniversary Edition, but Annual.
Annuals,
Annual, yeah. Definitely a squirrel girl, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
I read a lot of the original Spider-Mans.
A lot of the Hey There, Tigers. A lot of that sort of cheesy humor, cheesy.
Yeah, I do like those. They have some good plots, well redundant. They work.
And they're endearing.
For the time period, yeah.
They're a good, enjoyable read.
I also read the 6 main Civil War comics. Those were, I liked those. They weren't exactly the hype that everyone has.
Right, which you can't fully capture with just the pure storyline, but you got to deviate into the add-ons, the extras that just amplify the whole experience. What did you think of the art in those books?
The annual Spider-Man art, I read the first issue of that. Bad art, terrible art. I didn't like it as the comic was. But the art for the original Spider-Man and all of that, I liked it. It was pretty good. It was all in black and white from where I was reading. I don't know if that was how it was published or not. But it was black and white, but still good art. Got the message across.
Yep.
Civil War, what can I say? It's great art, great story arc. And, yeah.
It is an industry standard. Alright, so I'm going to tell you about a little comic I've been reading as of late, which is Huck. And it's now on issue 4, and it got a movie deal after just the first issue.
Oh, wow. Who's it by?
It's by a writer of Superman, who's Mark Miller. He's exceptional. He's had some great stories, and this is just the same. He's known for great movies, great books. Most of his books have been turned to movies, and it has great art. It really returns to the heroic sort of theme. It's a small town orphan who has these powers which we haven't really delved into yet, but he uses them to carry out good deeds for the people around the village, and it's really just refreshing to see that sort of positive, endearing sort of comic.
Especially from a writer who's from DC, we don't see that the light side that much.
Yeah, it's definitely a very Darth Vader-ish place to be.
Yes.
But as I said, the art is endearing, the dialogue is great, and every scene is just beautiful. One of the other reads this week is Deathstroke issue 1, which is about as different from Huck as you can get. It's got some pretty graphic scenes, which I wouldn't recommend for younger audiences, but he's such an enjoyable character, and it really paints him from a more heroic point of view than most people see him as, and not as just a cold mercenary, but as like someone making their living, which is a great way to go about it. It's got some good art. And then lastly is Scarlet Witch issue 2, and that was one of the better reads of the week too. I did specify issue 2 because issue 1 wasn't very good in my opinion.
Yes, I heard that the art was terrible.
The art was pretty bland. It wasn't horrible, but it wasn't anywhere near exceptional, and it could have done a lot better in many areas, as in not making her look like a formless blob.
Yeah, from Marvel we expect more.
Right, and from comics in general. But the plot and writing was good, and that staple carried over to the second issue. But the main difference was a vast increase in the quality of art. It was just absolutely stunning. It's got brilliant colors, brilliant pages full of vibrant action, and it looks like the sort of comic you could take out and put on your wall and not feel ashamed about.
So what did Marvel do right?
They changed the artist. They got a guy who I hadn't heard much about, but his name is Marco Rudy, and hey, keep an eye out for this guy. He's pretty darn good. I mean, I'd buy one of his paintings for my wall if we had walls in this cardboard shack of ours.
Yes.
So that's about all I have for my comic reads this week. Definitely been getting into the all new, all different titles, checking out the Civil War II previews that started coming out. The first being Dead No More or something like that. It's pretty haunting, but it kind of balanced out with the second one, which was something about fearing the sting, which is, less intimidating. I mean,
I suppose.
I suppose if you're Muhammad Ali or someone, you'd be a little bit more scared of that sort of thing. But as of yet, I am not trembling in my boots. So this brings us to our final segment, which is the letter of the week. Unfortunately, we don't have any letters this week. Can you believe it?
I cannot.
Yeah, how dare they not write in?
Right.
How dare they listen to absolutely nothing but still not write in?
Yeah.
I mean, the effort we put into this, it's insane.
Anyways, which brings us to how you can contact us.
Yeah, and that would be thecomicbooknetwork@gmail.com. Simply email that address. That's thecomicnetwork that's @gmail.com.
We'll be checking that often, and we hope to respond to it. If not on the episode, just sending you an email back.
You can send questions, comments, concerns, safety hazards. We're not necessarily 911, but we do have control of most ambulances, and please don't hold that to us. And we will deny it in a court of law. So this concludes our first episode ever. We made it all the way through. Can you believe that?
I am. And send in those main topic ideas if you have any.
Yeah, absolutely. We need some of those, and that would do a lot to help us out. You can find these episodes hopefully every Monday on YouTube, Spreaker, and possibly iTunes. Those can all be found by searching the Comic Book Network. And that about wraps it up. Thank you all for listening.
Hopefully in the future we expect to get better at this, less awkward. So stick with us.
Less like my co-host, I'd say, is probably our aim. Actually, we're firing him.
Yeah.
You're fired.
Thanks.
You're out. We had a good run. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time. Hopefully, this is us signing out. Goodbye.
Goodbye.